Billy, a mentally tormented man, gets instructed by an unknown person on the phone to carry out certain tasks to complete a ritual, being given 3 days, a clown mask, and a revolver. The question is any of the supernatural events he witnesses real or a figment of his imagination? Hi folks, I'm R and welcome to the video. If you enjoy this kind of content, hit me up on Twitter with your video suggestions and ideas. This video will contain spoilers. With that said, let's begin. Billy, the protagonist of the game, wakes up in his house with a phone ringing. The phone call seems to be from an unseen, powerful, and manipulative cult, congratulating Billy on his previous accomplishments, allowing the cult to trust them even more.
Rejoice, child. Rejoice in the knowledge of your conviction. You have completed our series. You are now of the enlightened children, learned in the ways of your Father's vision. As you know, your goals are divine, and your methods are pure. You have received an additional parcel with the final volume of our series. I would ask you now to open it and observe its contents. You now have your goal. Join us as we create our perfect world. Begin creating your Father's vision.
They instruct him to open a box and study its contents, as they are intended to be used for his next missions. Missions that will officially welcome him to the cult and completely absolve him. The parcel being sent to him anonymously by the cult contains a revolver, a flashlight, and a clown mask. In his closet, which contains a strange surreal tunnel-like passage leading to a fleshy creature with sharp teeth, he gets asked by the creature to feed it. Something that seems to be completely supernatural, something completely out of place. His house also seems severely neglected, with all sorts of rubbish lying around and with the TV being constantly on, displaying how lonely Billy truly is, not having much to do, as if he was waiting all his life for a certain purpose. A void the cult promises to fill, making Billy feel special. Billy then avoids using the front door, displaying clear discipline in preventing his neighbors or anyone else discovering what he does in his free time, which seems to be all he does. He seemingly uses the back door through the garage, getting in his pickup truck to avoid any detection and suspicion. While driving around, preying on victims he's supposed to capture for his mission, he conveniently notices a lonely woman at a closed gas station at late hours, calling a friend to pick her up as her car broke down. Billy parks the car at a nearby location in the woods, not to raise any suspicion, and slowly creeps on the woman walking to her. He then uses the revolver that was delivered to him and shoots the woman in cold blood, killing her instantly. Subsequently, he proceeds to take her body and load it in the back of his pickup truck. Billy, distraught at the result of his actions, not fully understanding what he's doing, yet being manipulated and believing he's doing the work of a higher being, that he is in fact creating a better world and performing necessary rituals, he looks at the corpse of the woman he just mercilessly gunned down and expresses heavy remorse, apologizing to her, yet justifying it, saying he had no other choice. Back in his house, he drops the corpse of the woman into the fleshy creature's hole residing in his closet, which in response says, "Yummy," being satiated for the day. This creature clearly is depicted to be part of the higher being and purpose of the cult, or the higher being itself, and Billy feeds the entity believing he's doing the right thing, a ritual that requires sacrifices. The ritual seems to need to continue for 2 more days before the grand revelation, something that even Billy is not too sure of what it would be. The next day, as Billy wakes up, he is shocked to the sight that his closet is back to normal and doesn't contain the fleshy creature anymore. His closet simply contains some of his overalls, which is covered up by a divider. Billy, confused to the sight, finds a note slipped under his door. I know what you do at night. I know it's you. I know it's you. I know it's you. I know. The strange nature of the letter, with bad grammar at one point, creates the feeling that it's nothing but Billy's imagination, his sense of guilt, the feeling that he might be wrong actually. As if the letter was from a neighbor, instead of warning Billy so he could destroy any evidence of his crime, they would notify the authorities so that Billy would be arrested. Despite the strange nature of the letter, the story is visualized through Billy's perspective. He believes that this letter is real, even though it echoes his own inner thoughts. Anxious and stressed to the context of the letter, he continues cautiously with his mission and yet again leaves through the garage, getting in his truck. After a while of driving, having a sense of purpose, he parks his truck deep in the woods again and sets on foot looking for his next victims. After some walking, he stumbles upon a campsite with 3 people camping. He proceeds to shoot them quickly, not giving them a chance to react. He subsequently picks up the corpses one by one and loads them at the back of his truck. While catching his breath momentarily and shaking off his stress and panic, he looks at the corpses one by one, trying yet again to justify his actions and suppress any feelings of remorse. He shows compassion and sense of understanding that this might not be the right thing, thinking if they had a family, if he's doing the right thing, and eventually that it's too late for regret. This clearly depicts that Billy is not a sociopathic killer who gets pleasure and joy out of killing like many other serial killers. He believes in his uneventful life. His true and higher purpose is to satisfy the cult's cause, to heed to the higher power's orders, which in this case is feeding the fleshy monster in his closet. He drives back home and plans to take the corpses one by one to the entity. Strangely, the entity seems to be back in his closet, in the surreal pocket of the tunnel-like passage, the closet that was empty and normal just earlier that day. Before Billy goes through the closet, he observes a copy of himself appearing shortly before vanishing in thin air, confusing Billy to what is happening. He contemplates for a while if his short encounter with a double of himself was real or just the result of his hallucination. If this was a hallucination, then what evidence would there be for the entity being real or the result of his hallucination as well? He shrugs off these thoughts and continues to feed the entity with the remaining corpses. With one more day remaining to complete the ritual, Billy witnesses a realistic nightmare where he is the victim of himself, with a double of himself shooting him dead before running away. This shows that a part of him still senses his guilt and portrays that whatever he's doing is not right. Subsequently, waking up to a phone call, which has a more sinister tone, repeats that Billy needs more victims.
You need more victims, you need more victims, you need more.
This is instead of suggesting that it needs more victims, referring to the entity, which in a way suggests that Billy might in fact suffer from hallucination and psychosis, with none of his encounters being real apart from the killings. And in fact, the murders and killings is nothing but for himself. The cult-like organization might be real as well, exploiting Billy's delusions into convincing him that he's the tool for a higher purpose, explaining how he received a parcel with a clown mask and a revolver, unless this is entirely part of his more elaborate delusion, ordering the revolver and a mask himself, believing it came from a cult that doesn't exist. Which also makes more sense that the second phone call entailed that Billy is the one who needs victims.
You need more victims, you need more victims, you need more.
Billy then notices another note slipped under his door, being more aggressive and confrontational, yet again reflecting his own inner thoughts. You won't get away with it, stupid whore. Who do you think you are? As Billy wears his mask and arms himself to get to his truck, he suffers from another delusion, seeing himself behind his truck as a separate entity, an entity that is hunting him, separate from his own body. This portrays how this monster of a person he has become is an entity he doesn't see himself as. Instead, he sees an ever-present passenger taking control of his life. Billy gets in his truck, and this time he becomes more blatant and arrogant, going to a neighborhood full of small houses and trailers. He notices a trailer with lights on and music playing, knowing that the door would be unlocked. His guess is right as he enters with the door being unlocked. He ambushes a woman talking on the phone, not noticing Billy, whom he kills mercilessly. Billy then proceeds to the next room, where he witnesses a man raising his arms begging for his life, whom Billy also shoots down, not feeling much of the remorse he had before. After loading up the corpses in the back of his truck, Billy displays that he has lost his remorse, and even explaining he doesn't care anymore. A brutal path of being someone normal and compassionate to someone cruel and indifferent to people's suffering, all due to his delusional calling. After feeding the corpses to this fleshy entity dwelling within his closet, a fleshy goat creature emerges out with a text mentioning "all done." And with that, Billy is absolved and reaches the pinnacle of existence, fulfilling his purpose. The fate of Billy is left unknown and up to personal interpretation, as what would become of him now after reaching his ultimate goal and completing the ritual. Is the cult fictional, or does it actually exist? And did they use a mentally ill Billy in order to conduct their sadistic and psychopathic actions? One thing is clear, that Billy suffered from mental illness and hallucinated frequently. He received strange notes which reflected his own inner thoughts to how horrible he is and how psychopathic he's become. The notes clearly did not come from any real person, as they would have already reported him to the police, but instead, the notes tried to criticize Billy for what he had become, confronting him with his crimes. He also saw himself as a different entity who even attacked him in one of his vivid dreams or visions. When Billy also woke up each day, he observed his closet being normal with no sight of the monstrous entity. It only became present later on when he murdered his victims and brought them back home. Billy seems to be someone without a job or purpose in his life. His loneliness possibly worsened his mental health and caused him to have a delusion of a higher purpose, something to keep himself going and have a sense of belonging. From the messy house he lives in, it's clear he doesn't take care of his house and doesn't show much interest in cleaning and looking after himself. He wakes up at night just to look for his praise. It's not shown what he does for the rest of the day, but it seems as if he goes to work and tries to function like a normal person while he doesn't like his job, or maybe he spends it getting rid of the corpses, as the entity doesn't seem to exist. So it's not very clear if he actually has a job or not, as it's not really shown. Billy at first shows compassion and signs of remorse, but soon he transforms into a monster who doesn't care anymore. The notes being his inner thoughts fully disappear as his sense of guilt disappears, with Billy seemingly becoming a full-on killer. A sense of purpose in his life, hence why the ritual needed to be complete so Billy can be reborn as a killer. A short teaser called Feed Me More Billy is in development, which shows that Billy actually becomes more of an elaborate killer, going to nightclubs and luring his victims to a new modern-like house, a house that he might have stolen from one of his victims. But hopefully more on the story later when it fully comes out. Now, what does the fleshy goat mean at the end, the final fruit of Billy's crimes? Goats in real life as spirit animals or symbolisms are believed to depict confidence and sense of opportunity and great heights in life. Therefore, the goat produced by the fleshy monster indicates how Billy reached his purpose, being an emotionless killer with a new sense of existence. In fact, the higher entity Billy was serving was no other than himself, slowly getting rid of his human inhibitions and emotions, purifying him into a higher entity. Billy could also be serving an actual flesh-eating monster, a monster that is seen in one of the endings of Stay Out of the House, with the night shift abductor serving it, growing in his rundown house. You can watch the 2 videos I made about the game by hitting the cards above. This could simplify the plot to some degree that Billy in fact serves a supernatural entity, but Billy being a delusional, mentally tormented man is my personal interpretation and what I believe is more fitting. Something that is more prone to happen in real life, which makes the story even more intriguing and horrifying. It's likely that Billy will continue on with his killing spree as he transformed into a new person, a purifier and a cleaner in his twisted mind. If you enjoyed this video, you can watch more videos about Puppet Combo games by checking out the playlist. It's been your host Star, and I will see you on the next one.